Hello there, and welcome. I'm so glad you made it. Maybe you've had a long day, or maybe you're simply the kind of person whose mind wanders more easily at night, drawn not to sleep by silence, but by stories, by soft wonder, by the kind of quiet exploration that doesn't demand your attention, only gently invites it. If that's you, you're in the right place. You don't have to do anything now. You're not expected to remember. This isn't a quiz. There's no test at the end. Just let yourself drift, breathe, and rest. And if your eyes grow heavy, that's perfectly fine. That's what this is for. Tonight, we're going to begin a different kind of journey. Not through stars or space, but through something much closer, much quieter. Tonight, we'll begin exploring Earth's plants. Those living, breathing companions all around us, so easy to overlook that they've become almost invisible. But they're not passive, not at all. Plants move, they plan, they learn, they even communicate in their own slow, green ways. They've been here longer than us, and they'll likely be here long after. They outnumber us, outlive us, and quietly shape the world we live in, from the air we breathe to the soil beneath our feet. And while you're settling in, before your eyes grow too heavy, I'd love it if you gently tapped subscribe or pressed the little hype button YouTube recently added. It's a small click, but it helps keep these experiments and explorations orbiting out into the algorithm. You can also leave a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is in your corner of the night. It's oddly fascinating to see where people are drifting off with us, scattered across the world like stars across the galaxy. The plants we'll meet in the chapters ahead are full of secrets. Some are ancient survivors, unchanged since the days of the dinosaurs. Others are delicate specialists, growing only in the misty layers of jungle canopies or hidden caves where no sunlight ever reaches. Some live just a few days, others live for thousands of years. Some move so slowly we barely notice. Others react in milliseconds. But they are all extraordinary, living green sculptures of adaptation and resilience. We often think of plants as background, as decoration, quietly there. But if you step back, or rather, step slower, you begin to see them differently. You start to notice the way leaves angle themselves to catch the first light of morning, the way vines reach out to grasp things they cannot see, the way roots sense obstacles and change course beneath the soil. These are not passive lives. They are just quiet ones. And that quiet can be a kind of wisdom. There is a tree in California that has lived for over 800 years. It was already old when the pyramids were new. It has seen winters come and go thousands of times, and it is still here. Its bark twisted and silver, its needles catching mountain wind. A few miles away, another forest grows upward so fast it almost seems to race. The Redwoods, the tallest trees on Earth, pulling water hundreds of feet against gravity in silent columns. Beneath them, ferns uncurl like slow clocks. Mushrooms pulse beneath the surface. A network of fungi stretches through the soil, connecting roots, sharing nutrients, sending signals. The forest is not a collection of individuals. It is a conversation, and not all of it is grand. Some of the most incredible plant life is small. Mosses that grow on glacial rock, surviving in thin layers of ice, tiny aquatic ferns that double in population every 2 days, seeds that sleep for centuries, waiting for just the right whisper of rain. Every blade of grass has a story. Every tree ring is a memory. Every flower is a message written in light. In the days to come, we'll explore 100 of these green marvels. Some will be familiar, others strange. Some will seem almost impossible. Trees that explode, vines that kill, flowers that mimic insects so perfectly they fool entire species. There will be plants that count time, that sense gravity, that grow without light, that smell their neighbors and react. Plants that communicate through chemicals, that lure, trap, and digest prey. That survive volcanoes, that regrow after fire, that remember stress, that climb, that run out of air and wait for centuries in silence. And we'll take our time, one chapter at a time, one soft discovery at a time. For now, you don't need to do anything but listen, or not listen. Let the words wash past you. Let your breath slow. Let your body grow soft and heavy. There is no urgency here. You're not falling behind. You're not late. Everything is in its season. Outside, somewhere, a leaf is turning to follow the moonlight. Somewhere, a desert seed is waiting beneath the sand. Somewhere, a flower is blooming in darkness, timed perfectly to attract a single moth. This world is more alive than we imagine, even in its stillness, especially in its stillness. So welcome. Again, you're not alone here. You're among trees. In the hush of a forest, long after flames have passed, something remarkable begins to stir. Not in panic, not in ruin, but in rebirth. The air, once filled with smoke and crackling heat, falls still again. Blackened trunks stand in quiet rows like ancient sentinels, their bark charred but unbowed. Beneath them, ash settles into the soil, a gray blanket rich with the minerals of what once was, and within that ash, seeds begin to stir, seeds that were waiting, seeds that could not grow until they were burned. Some trees do not fear fire. Some trees remember it. High in the northern forests, where winters are long and summers dry, lives the lodgepole pine. From a distance, it looks ordinary, tall, straight, narrow needles clustered in pairs. But look closer, and you'll find something strange. Its cones are sealed shut, coated in resin like fossilized secrets. Rain does nothing. Snow leaves them unchanged. Time passes, but they do not open. Not until heat arrives. Intense, searing, transformative heat. Fire. These cones are serotinous, a quiet adaptation to a fiery world. They remain closed for years, even decades, waiting for the one event that most other species dread. When wildfire sweeps through a lodgepole forest, it seems like destruction. Trees snap and fall. Underbrush is swallowed in flame. But as the heat rises, something ancient awakens. The resin softens. The cones crack open, and hundreds of seeds spill out into the scorched earth, now cleared of competition and rich with ash. For the lodgepole pine, fire is not an ending. It is the beginning of everything. This is not unique to one tree. Across the world, there are species that have made peace with fire, not by resisting it, but by depending on it. In the chaparral of California, the knobcone pine grows cones so hard they are almost like stone. In the Australian bush, the banksia opens only after flame passes. Eucalyptus trees carry volatile oils in their leaves that make them burn hotter and faster. But this too is part of the plan. When the flames die, they sprout again from hidden buds buried beneath thick bark. Even death, it seems, is not always permanent in the plant world. Fire, for these forests, is not chaos. It is rhythm. A long, slow breath that clears away the old and gives space for the new. Without it, the forest can grow too dense. Dead wood piles up, choking the undergrowth. Shade thickens. Seeds lie buried in silence, unable to sprout. But then the flames come, and the cycle begins again. Some trees fall, but others rise. Some species vanish, but others appear, small and green, their cotyledons unfolding like hope in the soot. There's a kind of memory in this. Not memory the way we know it. No thoughts, no images, but something deeper, genetic, evolutionary. Trees do not think about fire, but they remember it in their shapes, in their seeds, in the stories written into their cones. Over thousands of years, the forests that survived were the ones that learned to work with flame rather than fight it. They passed that memory forward, generation after generation, in the quiet language of DNA. Sometimes we think of forests as static, as places of stillness and peace. But forests are not frozen. They are dynamic, moving slowly across time, shaped by cycles longer than human lives. Fire is part of that motion. It sculpts the landscape. It curates. It decides what stays and what goes, which species take root and which fade into the understory. Even animals learn to follow the burn. Some birds nest in freshly burned areas, where predators are fewer and insects plentiful. Some plants only bloom in the season after a fire, their seeds triggered by smoke or charred soil. Life doesn't just return. It was waiting all along. There is a kind of paradox here. We imagine fire as destruction, but in these ecosystems, suppression can be more harmful than the flame itself. Decades of fire prevention lead to buildup. More fuel, more risk, hotter burns when they finally come. But when fire is allowed its place, when it arrives with the frequency and scale the forest has come to expect, it clears gently. It moves like a necessary disturbance, not a catastrophe. In the lodgepole pine forests of Yellowstone, scientists witnessed this after the Great Fires of 1988. At the time, the damage looked absolute. Entire hillsides blackened, trails vanished, rivers filled with ash. But within a single year, green shoots pierced the soil. Within 5, saplings stood knee-high. Within 10, the forest had changed, not ended. The old trees were gone, but their children were thriving, grown from cones that only knew how to open in fire. It's easy to overlook this kind of resilience. Trees move at a pace we rarely stop to match. Their strategies are not flashy. They don't flee. They don't shout. They wait. And in that patience, they carry the knowledge of fire not as a fear, but as a fact, something inevitable and essential and even beautiful. So the next time you see a burned forest, look again. Look for the cones that have opened. Look for the seedlings pushing through ash. Look for the ways life begins, not despite the flame, but because of it. Some trees are shaped by fire, and some trees remember. Beneath the surface of every forest, every prairie, every patch of grass, there is a hidden world. It doesn't rise and fall with the wind. It doesn't shimmer in the sunlight or bend with the rain. It's darker than that, quieter, invisible to most eyes, but no less alive. Beneath our feet, roots stretch like nerves through the soil. They twist, branch, probe, and reach, tracing the dark in search of water, minerals, and space. And in that silent, tangled web, a slow and ancient conflict unfolds. One without noise or blood, but no less intense. The slowest wars are fought in roots. We often imagine plants as passive, peaceful, unthinking, but evolution has shaped them with every bit as much cunning as any predator. Only, they do not run or chase. They defend, they strategize, they remember, and they compete, not with claws or teeth, but with chemistry, with patience, with invisible lines drawn through the ground. A single tree in a crowded forest may share the air above, but below, its roots are mapping the territory, testing the space around them for rivals. They can sense when another plant is near. They know the difference between themselves and others. And when the boundary is crossed, they do not shout, they do not scream, they release. This is Allelopathy, the quiet art of chemical warfare in the soil. Some plants, when threatened or crowded, produce compounds that seep into the ground, drifting through the earth like unseen smoke. These compounds don't kill immediately. They don't scorch or burn. Instead, they disrupt. They slow germination. They stunt root growth. They make life harder, one molecule at a time. juglone, released by black walnut trees, can inhibit the growth of many nearby species. Sagebrush, sunflowers, and even some grasses do the same. They leave behind traces in the dirt. Messages, warnings, barricades. The war is slow but relentless. Roots are not just reaching for water, they are feeling for presence. In crowded fields, plants will grow shorter, faster, or more defensively depending on who surrounds them. Some species adjust the shape of their leaves or the depth of their roots depending on who they sense nearby. Even seedlings, just days old, can detect the difference between the chemical signature of a sibling and a stranger. In some cases, siblings will grow more cooperatively, sharing resources. Strangers compete, expanding in opposite directions, each trying to claim as much as possible before the other does. But it isn't just about chemicals. There is competition for sunlight, but also for the hidden lifeblood of the earth. Water, nitrogen, phosphorus. In dry lands, plants develop deeper taproots to reach moisture locked far below. In wetlands, they grow wide and shallow to sip from the surface. In nutrient-poor soils, they extend their roots in fine, filament-like hairs, trying to maximize contact. And in every direction, other roots are doing the same. Sometimes they twist around each other. Sometimes they avoid one another entirely. In a single square meter of soil, there can be miles of root length, crossing paths, probing for opportunity, shifting in slow response. Some plants go further. They hijack the relationships of others. Parasitic species like dodder wrap themselves around host plants, sinking their structures into the victim's vascular system and siphoning away sugars and water. Others use mimicry. Some roots release scents that imitate healthy soil or friendly fungi, tricking neighbors into growing toward them, only to suppress them once they're close enough to matter. A trap laid in molecules, a slow ambush measured in months. And yet, for all the competition, there are moments of uneasy truce. Some plants, through root exudates, signal peace. Others form alliances with fungi, Mycorrhizae, that extend their reach and help mediate these underground tensions. The fungi benefit from sugar, the plant from enhanced access to nutrients. But even this alliance can turn. If one party stops giving, the other can pull away. Even cooperation here is conditional. Nothing underground is truly neutral. When we walk through a forest, it feels stable, permanent. The trees are where they've always been. The grass is green, the canopy high, but that stability is built on countless quiet battles beneath the soil. Which seedling survives? Which root outpaces its rival? Which chemical edge tips the balance? It's warfare without sound. Territory marked not by flags, but by patterns of absorption and release. The winners grow tall. The losers fade slowly into the detritus layer, recycled back into the soil to nourish those who remain. And through it all, we rarely notice. The grass beneath our feet may be at war with itself. The garden you planted may be negotiating 1,000 invisible boundaries every hour. What looks like stillness is often a living chessboard, one where every move is made slowly, but with consequence. Plants do not scream when they are pushed out, but they persist. They evolve strategies in silence. They respond not with rage, but with resilience. Theirs is a kind of strength that does not show itself in speed or sound, but in persistence, in adaptation, in roots that dig deeper, in chemicals that linger in the earth long after the plant has gone. It is a battle not of minutes, but of seasons. So when you think of nature as peaceful, think again. Beneath every meadow and hillside, every grove and garden, there is motion, there is intention, there is memory and resistance and quiet will. The slowest wars are not the least fierce. They are simply the most patient. High above the forest floor, where sunlight filters in like spilled gold through broken stained glass, there is another world. You won't see it from the path. You won't hear it from the ground. But it's there, drifting just out of reach, like a ghost town built in the treetops. No roots in soil, no footprints on earth, just plants suspended in air, clinging to bark, wrapping around limbs, hanging from branches like wind-blown whispers. These are the epiphytes, the ones who chose not to rise from the ground, but to live above it. They do not take, not really. They do not pierce the trees they live on, or steal their nutrients like parasites. They ask only for a place to rest, a perch, a ledge, a patch of moss on a branch broad enough to hold them. That's all they need. From there, they make do. They gather water from the mist, from the dew, from the rain that spills off the canopy in sudden silver streaks. They absorb nutrients from wind-blown dust, decaying leaves, the softened fragments of insects. They do not dig, they do not claim, but they endure. Entire gardens, floating in air. In the tropical jungles of Central and South America, the canopy is not a ceiling, it's a continent. It stretches for miles in every direction, a green ocean of tangled limbs and woven light. Within it, the air is warmer, thicker, more saturated, and in that atmosphere, epiphytes thrive. Orchids cling to rough bark, their roots exposed to the breeze, their flowers tilted toward the sun like open palms. Bromeliads form cups that hold rainwater, tiny pools suspended 50 feet above the ground, each one a miniature ecosystem teeming with insect larvae, frogs, and sometimes even small snakes. Ferns grow in unlikely places, uncurling from crevices in branches as if emerging from sleep. And moss, quiet and patient, blankets everything in a soft green hush. There are forests within forests, layers upon layers. The floor, the understory, the canopy, the emergence, and somewhere in between, the world of epiphytes. They turn a single tree into a neighborhood. They gather in clusters, build colonies, form bridges between limbs. Some plants use them for shelter. Some animals nest in them, drink from their reservoirs, hide in their folds. Birds weave them into their homes. Monkeys leap through them. Ants march across them in silent processions. They are the unsung infrastructure of the canopy, architects of elevation, gardeners of air, and yet they are rarely noticed. To see them clearly, you have to climb, not just physically, but mentally. You have to leave behind the assumption that plants need soil, or that all life begins from the ground. In the epiphyte world, there is no ground. There is only what you can hold on to, what will hold you. Some of them are born aloft. Others begin on the forest floor and rise later, climbing by any means available. Up bark, through vines, along scaffolds of lichen and moss. Once they reach the light, they settle in, they adapt, they forget the ground they came from. Their roots become anchors, not straws. They do not pull from the trees they rest on, but simply grip them, using their host as a ladder toward the Sunday. In cloud forests, where mist clings to everything like breath on glass, the epiphytes are especially rich. Whole trees can disappear beneath them. A branch that once held only bark now supports dozens of species: orchids, liverworts, lichens, and filmy ferns so delicate they seem sculpted from fog. These forests are dense, layered, impossibly lush. Water drips from everywhere, from leaves, from air itself. Light comes in shafts. Movement is slow. The air smells of wet bark and green decay. And suspended in this vertical wilderness, life hums softly, endlessly. Epiphytes live slow lives. They don't grow fast. They don't spread far, but they are resilient. Some orchids flower only once every few years, sending out a single bloom as bright and strange as a dream. Some bromeliads can go months without rain, storing water in their tightly wound centers like secret wells. Some mosses can dry out completely and revive days later with the touch of mist. They are not fragile. They are deliberate. And like ghosts, they leave behind traces. When they die, they fall to the forest floor, slowly, unraveling in strands, but their presence remains. In the way they shaped the microclimate of a branch, the way they housed an insect colony, the way they caught and held water for something else to drink. They are bridges between sky and soil, even if they never touch the earth. There is something beautiful in that, something humble, a life lived not in dominance, but in adaptation, not in conquest, but in coexistence. Epiphytes do not grow tall to reach the light. They find what's already tall and hold on. And yet, in doing so, they create a new world, quiet, suspended, unseen. If you ever find yourself walking through a rainforest, look up. Not just a glance, but a real look. Let your eyes follow the trunks all the way to where the branches disappear. Watch the way the vines tangle, the way moss creeps, the way light flickers through layers of leaves. Somewhere in that tangle, a single orchid might be blooming for the first time in 7 years. A frog might be sleeping in a bromeliad cup. A colony of ants might be building roads through a fern's fronds. They are not waiting for you to notice them. But if you do, you might see a forest inside the forest. And like a ghost seen once and never forgotten, you will never look at a tree the same way again. Time, for a plant, does not tick in numbers or ring from clocks. It isn't a collection of hours or a calendar on a wall. It is something slower, softer, something felt. Time, to a plant, is the length of a shadow, the color of morning, the temperature of dusk. It is the angle of light against a leaf, the cool breath of soil at night, the memory of yesterday's Sunday. With no eyes, no ears, and no language, plants still know the rhythm of time. They count it, not in seconds, but in light, in darkness, in silence. Even without a brain, they remember when to wake. A sunflower begins to move before the first light appears, its head following the arc of the sun, not just out of habit, but from a deep internal pulse. In the still hours of the night, it prepares, as if it already knows the choreography of the coming day. This is not guesswork. It is rhythm, written into cells and tissues, repeating in cycles that echo across days and seasons. A circadian clock, hidden in green. Every plant has one. A ticking mechanism not made of gears, but of genes and proteins, each activating and quieting in a predictable loop, roughly 24 hours long. It is not guided by light, but it listens for it. Even in constant darkness, this rhythm hums on. When light returns, it shifts slightly, syncing itself again, just as a traveler resets their watch after crossing a time zone. Plants drift a little, but never far. The rhythm is resilient, anchored. And this rhythm does more than guide a single day. It shapes the whole life of a plant. It tells it when to open its leaves and when to fold them, when to release scents, when to close stomata, when to grow. Flowers time their blooming with astonishing precision. Some open only for a few hours, and only at night, syncing their appearance with the habits of specific nocturnal pollinators. Others wait for dawn, catching the first warmth of sun to greet bees just waking from their hives. These decisions are not random. They are timed, tuned, repeated. But there is a larger rhythm too, one that unfolds not over hours but months, not circadian, but seasonal. A pattern of lengthening days and deepening nights, of shifting temperatures and changing winds. This is where plants sense the turning of the year itself, when to bloom, when to seed, when to sleep. Photoperiodism is the name for it, a quiet sensitivity to the balance of light and dark. Some plants are long day bloomers. They wait for the stretch of summer. Others are short day, triggered by the returning hush of autumn. Some are indifferent, blooming when other conditions feel right. But most respond to light like musicians follow a conductor, waiting for the signal, then bursting into song. They do not guess. They count. They measure, day by day, the length of time the sun hangs above them. When the threshold is reached, they begin. In winter, when the light shortens and the air cools, many plants slip into dormancy. Their roots draw back. Their metabolism slows. Leaves fall. Growth stills. It is not death, only sleep. A pause written into their being, a remembering of frost. And then, as the light returns, imperceptibly, at first, they stir. Buds form, stems stretch, a slow reawakening. To the human eye, it might seem like nothing is happening, but inside, the plant is preparing. It knows. Even seeds, resting in soil for weeks or years, keep time. Some need a certain number of cold days before they will sprout, a process called vernalization. Without it, they remain quiet, waiting. It is their way of avoiding a false spring, of not being tricked by a warm week in the middle of winter. Only once the cold has lasted long enough do they trust the warmth that follows. Only then do they emerge. There is wisdom in this delay. And yet, all of this knowing, this timing, happens without eyes, without ears, without memory in the way we understand it. Plants do not see the sunrise, but they feel it. They do not hear the clock strike, but their cells respond. Their internal rhythms align with the world in ways that feel almost magical, though they are simply biological, simply, wonderfully tuned. There is a peace in that, a sense that time is not something we must always chase, that perhaps there is another way to know the hour, not through alarms or screens, but by paying attention to light, to warmth, to change, a way to feel our way through time instead of racing it. The next time you see a tree in bloom, think of the months it counted to reach that moment, the days it measured in silence, the signals it sensed in the sky, the cold it endured, the patience it practiced. A bloom is not sudden. It is a conclusion, a choice made long ago, finally unfolding. Plants have no clocks, and yet they are never late. Beneath the quiet crunch of leaves, under the scattered twigs and the hum of soil life, there is a network older than cities and older than writing. It pulses without wires. It remembers without language. It spreads not with speed, but with depth. And within it, trees are not alone. They are part of something vast, something shared, something almost invisible. The forest floor is not the edge of a world. It's the threshold to another. One built not of roots alone, but of threads finer than hair, thinner than silk, reaching in every direction like veins under skin. These are the mycorrhizal networks, and through them, trees talk. It isn't the kind of talking we're used to. There are no sounds, no words, but messages are passed, nonetheless. Chemical signals travel from tree to tree, carried through these fungal filaments, alerting neighbors to danger, guiding growth, balancing needs. These signals ride the wood wide web, a nickname given by researchers to this interwoven system of fungi and roots that links nearly every tree in a temperate forest together, sometimes stretching for miles. It is not a metaphor. It is very real, and it is very much alive. The partnership begins with a trade. The fungi, microscopic and ancient, colonize the roots of a tree, weaving themselves into and around its outermost cells. In return for sugars produced by the tree through photosynthesis, the fungi offer something precious: access. They reach further into the soil than roots alone ever could, unlocking water, phosphorus, nitrogen, and other minerals that would otherwise remain out of reach. The exchange is constant, a silent economy running just beneath the soles of our shoes. But nutrients are only part of the story. The web does more than feed. It informs. When a tree is damaged by drought, by pests, by a saw's first bite, it releases chemical compounds into the network. These messages travel underground to nearby trees, especially to those of the same species, prompting them to shift. A neighbor might increase its production of protective enzymes. It might slow its growth or thicken its bark. It might store more carbon or adjust its leaf chemistry, and it does this before any damage has reached it. It prepares because someone else felt the pain first. There is a strange kind of empathy in this, not emotional, but biological, not conscious, but functional. The forest, connected by these fungal threads, responds not as individuals, but as a whole. Trees that have never touched share warnings. Trees shaded from the sun receive carbon from others, basking in light. Saplings growing in the shadows of giants are fed through the roots of those same towering elders. Not enough to thrive, but enough to survive. The biggest and oldest trees, often called mother trees, seem to play an outsized role in this web. Their roots are hubs, connecting to dozens, sometimes hundreds of other plants. They store knowledge in their rings, but also in their connections. When one of them dies, the impact echoes throughout the network. The fungi respond. The trees respond. The architecture shifts, as if mourning, or perhaps just rebalancing. Even in death, mother trees release their remaining nutrients into the system, a kind of final offering to the network they helped sustain. It is easy to miss this world. Above ground, we see competition, trees stretching for sunlight, vines choking trunks, canopies blocking out the understory. But below, there is cooperation, a constant negotiation of resources, an awareness of neighbors, a logic of balance. The forest isn't a collection of individuals. It is a system, a society, a single, breathing, rooted organism. And yet, the fungi do not belong to the trees. They are their own beings, ancient and mysterious. Some of the largest living organisms on Earth are fungal networks, spreading underground across hundreds of acres, surviving for thousands of years. They have no leaves, no stems, but they have memory, direction, purpose. They choose which roots to connect with, which trees to support. They reward the cooperative and punish the greedy. Trees that offer more sugars get more nutrients in return. Trees that hoard are cut off. Even without minds, there is regulation. In dry years, some trees will give more than they receive. In other years, the balance shifts. This flexibility allows the forest to adapt, to share resources where they're needed most, to buffer against extremes. It is a resilience built on connection, and it is deeply quiet. Imagine standing in a clearing, sun on your face, wind in your hair, all around you. Trunks rise like pillars, unmoving, silent. But under your feet, the network thrums. Thousands of miles of fungal threads are active, shifting nutrients, relaying signals, nurturing seedlings, recycling the dead. You are standing on an ancient internet, one that doesn't need screens or satellites. Just soil, just roots, just the will to survive together. There is no central controller here, no single brain, just millions of tiny choices, made moment by moment, cell by cell, until something intelligent emerges. Not in the way we define intelligence, but in the way the forest responds to itself, learns from itself, sustains itself. It is easy to forget that we once lived in these forests, that we too were part of this system, that our ancestors saw these trees not as resources, but as kin. They may not have had the words mycorrhizal or fungal network, but they knew something moved in the earth, something deep, something shared. Today, science has given us new tools to see what was always there, to trace the invisible threads, to listen to the forest not with ears, but with attention. And in doing so, we are reminded that intelligence is not limited to speech or speed or synapses. It can exist in the hush of roots, in the wisdom of waiting, in the quiet agreement to grow together. The trees do not speak in words, but they are never silent. Somewhere in the forgotten corners of the world, on the edges of bogs, in the cracked spines of acidic swamps, along rain-slicked cliffs where nothing seems to grow, you might find something unexpected. A leaf shaped like a mouth, a stalk glistening with sweetness and danger, a petal turned into a pit, patient and still. These are not illusions or fairy tales. These are carnivorous plants, real ones, green things that do not simply soak in the sun and wait for rain, but instead reach, trap, and consume. They are the quiet hunters of the plant world, lurking, watching, digesting. To us, it feels backwards. A plant eating an animal. It breaks the rule we learned early on, that animals move, hunt, feed, and plants just stand. But in the margins where nutrients are rare, where the soil is too poor or the water too stagnant, evolution rewrote the story. Some plants adapted not to compete with others for what the earth could not give, but to find their own answer. They looked up, they waited, they lured, and slowly, through thousands of tiny decisions across time, they began to eat. The Venus flytrap is perhaps the most famous, small, elegant, and fierce in its own way. Each trap is two lobes, hinged like a jaw, rimmed with delicate hairs and edged in spines. The inside is red, sometimes blushed with the pink of raw meat, a color not accidental. Insects drawn to the scent land within, exploring the softness, but this is no flower. If two of the tiny trigger hairs are touched in rapid succession, the trap closes in less than a second. It doesn't squeeze shut with strength, but with precision, forming a cage tight enough to hold a fly, yet still open just enough to let raindrops pass. If the insect struggles, the plant tightens its grip and begins to secrete enzymes, slowly breaking the prey down. It doesn't chew, it absorbs. Days later, the trap opens again, emptied, ready. But the fly trap is only one kind. There are others, stranger ones. Pitcher plants, for example, are elegant deceivers. Their leaves have evolved into tall, hollow chambers filled with fluid. The rim is slippery and often patterned in colors that shimmer in ultraviolet light, irresistible to pollinators and wanderers alike. Some smell sweet, others radiate warmth. A curious beetle or ant slips on the edge, tumbles inside, and finds no escape. The inner walls are waxy, ribbed downward, like a funnel. Wings are useless here. The fluid inside contains enzymes or bacterial cultures that begin the work of digestion. Some pitcher plants host entire communities. Mosquito larvae, mites, even frogs, that coexist inside the pool, feeding on prey or waste and helping process nutrients. It's a strange ecosystem nested within a single leaf. And then there are sundews, covered in glistening droplets that look like dew in the early light. These droplets are not water, they are glue, tiny beads of sticky mucilage at the ends of hair-like tentacles. When an insect lands, thinking it's found nectar, it becomes trapped. Slowly, the tentacles bend inward, curling over the struggling prey like fingers, pulling it closer to the leaf's surface, where digestion begins. It is slow, gentle, almost, but final. Why would a plant do this? Why evolve into something so unplant-like? It comes down to survival. Carnivorous plants tend to appear in environments where the soil is thin, acidic, or nearly devoid of nitrogen and phosphorus, elements essential for plant life. Where roots find nothing, leaves had to adapt. Carnivory is not an aggression, but a compensation, a different route to the same goal. If the earth gives nothing, take it from the air, from the living, from what lands above. And yet, For all their drama, these plants are still gentle creatures. They grow slowly. They do not eat often. A Venus flytrap will only close its trap a few times before the leaf dies, so it's selective. Pitcher plants sometimes go weeks without catching anything. Sundews can trap more than they need, but often allow small prey to escape. They are not greedy. They are opportunistic, efficient. Their hunger is real, but never reckless. In some places, entire meadows are dotted with them. Wetland fields where pitcher plants bloom like goblets tilted toward the sky, where sundews glisten red and green in low light. Each leaf a miniature galaxy of droplets. They don't compete with the towering pines or broad-leaved ferns. They survive where few others can, building strange kingdoms in hostile soils, taking what they need not by force, but by adaptation, cleverness, written into chlorophyll. Even their roots behave differently, often shallow, often small, as if they've given up on the ground entirely. They don't anchor to find nourishment. They anchor to not blow away. The work of feeding is done above, with traps, with tricks, with patience, and in their quiet way, they remind us that nature is not bound by the stories we've told about it, that a plant is not always a passive thing, that stillness can hide cunning, that even the greenest life can, under the right pressures, learn to hunt. We live in a world that moves quickly, that rewards speed, force, and noise. But the carnivorous plants are none of these. They are slow, they are still, and they are strange. They wait, they adapt, and they thrive on the edges. They are curiosities, yes, but not mistakes, not errors in the system. They are proof that nature has more imagination than we give it credit for. And sometimes, that imagination has teeth. Beneath the rustle of leaves, beneath the hum of wind through branches, beneath the quiet shimmer of light across the forest floor, something gentle and necessary is always unfolding. A breath. Not ours, but the planet's. A soft exhalation of life, invisible and patient, released from every blade of grass, every tree, every flicker of moss on stone. Photosynthesis. That ancient, nearly magical process by which plants catch sunlight and turn it into food, leaving behind a gift we barely notice. Oxygen. It floats into the air, mixes with the winds, and becomes the breath we take for granted. It begins in the light. When the sun rises, even before its rays fully reach the forest, chloroplasts inside plant cells begin to stir. These microscopic structures, green with pigment, are the tiny engines of photosynthesis. They absorb photons, packets of light energy, and use that energy to split water molecules pulled up from the soil. From that split comes hydrogen, used to build sugars, and oxygen, released as waste. What plants discard, we breathe. And it is happening everywhere. In the flutter of a fern's frond, in the needles of pines high in the mountains, in the microscopic algae drifting in oceans, in the leaves lining the sidewalks of cities. Every moment of light brings another moment of life. Quiet, cumulative, essential. It's common to say that forests are the lungs of the earth, and while that image is beautiful, it's not quite right. Lungs take in oxygen and release carbon dioxide. Forests do the opposite. They inhale carbon dioxide, what we and other animals exhale, and release oxygen in return. They breathe, in a sense, in reverse. But the metaphor holds because the effect is the same. Life continues. Air circulates. One breath feeds another. Still, even this is just part of the story. The oxygen we breathe now, so abundant, so assumed, was not always here. The early Earth had almost none. For billions of years, the atmosphere was a strange, choking mixture of volcanic gases, mostly nitrogen and carbon dioxide, with only traces of oxygen. Life existed, but only in the simplest forms. Anaerobic bacteria that could live without air. Then came cyanobacteria, blue-green algae, small, single-celled, and astonishing. They were among the first organisms to develop photosynthesis. Drifting through shallow seas, they began converting sunlight into energy, releasing oxygen into the water around them. At first, that oxygen was soaked up by iron and minerals, forming bands of rust on the ocean floor. But over millions of years, as the minerals became saturated, oxygen began to accumulate, slowly, relentlessly, until the air itself began to change. This was the Great Oxygenation Event, one of the most dramatic shifts in Earth's history. The atmosphere transformed, not with a bang, but with a breath that lasted eons. Most early life could not survive it. The oxygen was poison to many, but others adapted, and new life forms emerged that could use oxygen to power more complex processes. Multicellular organisms, plants, animals, eventually us. It was not a revolution sparked by force. It was a quiet uprising, carried out by trillions of microscopic plants drifting in oceans. No leaders, no design, just repetition, just photosynthesis, just time. Even now, it's not the towering forests alone that keep the balance. Tiny things do much of the work. Phytoplankton in the ocean, minuscule and often unseen, contribute at least half of the oxygen produced on the planet. They bloom in invisible waves, rise and fall with the seasons, and pulse with sunlight. Like green dust in the sea, they continue the legacy started billions of years ago. Small things, making big changes, one breath at a time. And yet, forests matter too. Not just for oxygen, but for how they store carbon, cool the air, filter water, anchor soil, and create habitats for more life than we can count. A forest is not just a collection of trees. It is a machine for balance, for air, for rain, for life itself. The Amazon rainforest alone cycles enormous amounts of moisture back into the atmosphere, shaping weather patterns continents away. It doesn't just live in place, it lives in motion. When trees grow, they trap carbon in their trunks, their branches, their roots. They store the memory of every season in rings of cellulose and bark. They mark droughts, floods, fires, and calm years, and when they fall and rot or are burned, much of that carbon is released again. The cycle turns, the breath continues, and it is delicate. For all its persistence, this planetary exhale is vulnerable to imbalance. Deforestation, pollution, warming oceans. These things tilt the equation. They make it harder for plants to do their work. They disrupt the silent rhythm that has kept our atmosphere livable for so long. It is a rhythm we rarely hear, but always depend on. Each inhale we take is ancient. It carries atoms from leaves a continent away, from oceans we've never seen, from forests we've never walked in. The air around us has passed through lungs, leaves, and waves, again and again. It is a gift that doesn't belong to us, but moves through us. And somewhere, even now, a plant is catching light, splitting water, and releasing a molecule of oxygen. One more breath sent out into the world, not with intention, but with consistency, with stillness, with grace. The planet does not breathe like we do, but it breathes nonetheless. There are plants alive today that have watched the world change so slowly, so completely, that they seem like relics from another time. They are the silent witnesses to extinction and eruption, to continents drifting apart and oceans carving new paths. These are not just old species. They are living fossils. Their leaves carry the shapes of ancient forests. Their branches echo the architecture of vanished ecosystems. Long before the first bird took flight, before the first mammal twitched in its burrow, before the rise and fall of the dinosaurs, they were already here, and they are still here. Take the ginkgo biloba. You might see it on a city street, planted in rows beside glass buildings and taxi horns. Its fan-shaped leaves flutter in the breeze, delicate as paper, veined like fossils. In autumn, they turn a rich, sudden gold, falling in a single day, sometimes all at once, as if responding to a memory we can't access. But this tree is no newcomer. Ginkgos are ancient. Their lineage stretches back more than 270 million years. Older than flowers, older than bees, older than the Himalayas. The ginkgo is the last of its kind, the only surviving species of a group that once blanketed prehistoric forests. Its story is one of persistence. It has seen ice ages and asteroid strikes, mass extinctions, and the slow unfolding of human civilization. And still, it grows. It grows in temples in China, where some trees are over 1,000 years old. It grows in busy urban spaces, resistant to smog and salt and heat. It has outlived its pollinators, its predators, and even its own relatives. To look at a ginkgo is to look into deep time, to glimpse a shape that once cast shadows on the feet of trilobites and early reptiles. And the ginkgo is not alone. The cycads are older still. They look like small palms or oversized ferns, with crowns of thick, leathery leaves and heavy cones nestled in the center. But these are not just ornamental oddities. Cycads once fed the great plant-eating dinosaurs. Their forests covered entire regions during the Mesozoic era, when the earth was warmer and wetter and filled with creatures with names we now learn from museum plaques. Some cycad species today are nearly indistinguishable from their fossilized ancestors. Their DNA whispers secrets from an era when the sky was filled with pterosaurs and the night echoed with entirely unfamiliar sounds. Cycads have survived not by racing forward, but by holding still, by resisting change. Their seeds are toxic, their growth is slow, and their forms are rugged. In some parts of the world, there are groves of cycads so old that their current generation began before the rise of Rome, before the invention of writing, before humans made their mark on the stones of the earth. And then there are the horsetails, slender, jointed stalks with brush-like whorls that resemble green bottle brushes. To some, they are weeds. To others, they are medicine. But to the earth, they are memory. Horsetails once grew taller than trees, forming swampy forests in the Carboniferous period, more than 300 million years ago. Back then, they reached heights of 30 feet or more, their stems thick and segmented, rising in misty groves where dragonflies the size of hawks buzzed through the humid air. Those ancient horsetails helped create the coal beds we now burn for energy. They helped shape the very ground we build our lives upon. Today's horsetails are much smaller, often just knee-high, but they are genetically linked to those towering ancestors. They grow in wet places, in ditches and stream banks, sending up shoots that seem simple, even primitive. And yet, they are survivors. They have weathered every mass extinction. They have watched as species came and went like flickers in a candle flame. They carry inside them the logic of a world we barely understand. To call these plants living fossils is not to say they haven't changed at all. Evolution never stands completely still. But these plants have found something that works, something resilient, something so effective at survival that they have been shaped more by time than by the need to adapt. Their endurance is a kind of slow defiance, and in that defiance, there is beauty. In a world obsessed with the new, the fast, the ever-updating, there is something quietly powerful about plants that have lasted not just centuries, but epochs. They do not advertise their age. They do not boast. They simply continue. They push up through soil, unfurl leaves that mirror those pressed into ancient stone, and begin again, season after season, era after era. We are used to thinking of fossils as things that are dead, trapped in stone, locked away in drawers and museums. But some fossils are still breathing, still photosynthesizing, still swaying in the wind. And they remind us that the past is not as distant as we think. It is present in leaves and cones and spores. It grows quietly beside us. To walk among these plants is to step across a threshold in time, to move through a living memory of Earth. The ginkgo, the cycad, the horsetail, they are not just plants. They are time travelers. They are echoes of forests long vanished. They are survivors not just of change, but of silence. And through them, the world remembers itself. In a quiet grove somewhere along the misty coasts of California, or tucked deep within the forests of southeastern Australia, there are trees so tall, so massive, that they shift the scale of the world around them. You step beneath their canopies, and your voice instinctively softens. The light dims, not because the day has faded, but because the leaves above you form their own sky. You look up, and up, and up, and still cannot see where the green ends and the sky begins. These are the giants of the green world, trees that do not just grow, but rise. The coast redwood, Sequoia sempervirens, is the tallest living organism on Earth. Some stretch beyond 350 feet into the air, higher than a 30-story building, higher than any living creature has a right to be. Their bark is thick and soft, a strange contradiction, like dry sponge and armor all at once. It's rich in tannins, which protect it from fire, from insects, from decay. Their roots are surprisingly shallow, only 10 to 15 feet deep, but they spread wide and interlace with those of their neighbors, forming a vast underground network of support, like hands quietly holding hands. They don't get there quickly. A redwood seed is the size of a tomato seed, small enough to balance on the tip of a finger, but within that speck is the potential for 1,000 years of growth. Some of the redwoods standing today began life when the Roman Empire still ruled, when paper was new, when humans had not yet crossed many of the oceans. They have been growing, slowly and without hurry, for centuries, through fire and fog, drought and storm. They continued, quiet, relentless. Even taller, once, were the Australian mountain ashes, Eucalyptus regnans. The tallest ever reliably measured was nearly 400 feet. Trees of such size are rare now, but remnants of that ambition still rise from cool, wet mountain forests, their pale trunks glowing like ghosts in the underbrush. Unlike redwoods, they grow quickly. A young mountain ash can gain 20 feet in a single year under the right conditions, racing for the light, staking its claim in the canopy. Their limbs are more fragile, their bark more vulnerable, but still they climb, pressing against the limits of what a plant can do. And then there are the giant sequoias, Sequoiadendron giganteum, which are not quite as tall as the coast redwoods, but far more massive. They are the heaviest living trees on Earth, with trunks wide enough to drive a car through, branches thicker than most ordinary trees. The General Sherman tree, growing in California's Sequoia National Park, weighs an estimated 2.7 million pounds. It has lived for over 20 years. In that time, it has seen entire civilizations rise and fall, seen continents reshaped, climates shift, languages born and forgotten, and through it all, it has grown a little more each year. But even giants must obey the quiet rules of biology. A tree can only get so tall. At a certain point, gravity begins to win. Water drawn up from the roots must fight a constant battle to reach the highest leaves. It moves not through pumps or muscles, but through capillary action and evaporation, pulled upward in columns thinner than a strand of hair. The taller the tree, the harder this becomes. Leaves at the very top must be more efficient, more drought-tolerant. The trunk must taper just enough to support the immense weight without snapping. There is a limit, not a sharp one, but a soft ceiling shaped by physics and time. So why do trees grow this tall at all? Partly, it's competition. In a dense forest, the sun is everything. To capture light, A tree must rise above its neighbors. The higher it grows, the more energy it can gather. But it's not just ambition. Height also brings safety. From floods, from ground fires, from grazing animals. A redwood's cones grow high in the canopy, out of reach of most creatures, its reproduction sheltered in the clouds. And then there's resilience. A tall tree can outlive disruption. It can wait out centuries. It can watch the world change and simply continue. Walking among these trees is not like walking among anything else. You don't just see them, you feel them. There is a weight in the air, not of pressure, but of presence. The wind sounds different. The shadows move slower. Time seems to pool around their roots, thick and still. You can press your palm to their bark and feel warmth, feel silence, feel something you might call memory. These trees have survived fires so intense they hollowed their trunks, and yet they live on. They have survived logging, droughts, lightning. They are older than the countries we live in. They are older than most of our stories, and still, they are vulnerable. Logging, climate shifts, altered rainfall patterns. These threaten even the giants. Some redwoods now grow smaller than their ancestors, stressed by warmer nights and fog that comes less often. The tallest trees depend on delicate balances, cool roots, steady moisture, calm air. Disrupt those, and the balance begins to shift. Even giants must breathe. But for now, they stand. In groves and parks, in wilderness and memory. They stand in the mist, catching light before it touches the ground. They sway in storms that flatten lesser things. They are not fast. They are not loud. But they endure. We are small beneath them. Not in a way that belittles, but in a way that reminds. That shows us how wide and old and patient the world can be. These trees do not hurry. They do not seek attention. They simply grow. A little each year. A little closer to the sky. And when they fall, because even giants do, they nourish what comes next. Their trunks become bridges and nurseries. Seedlings sprout from their fallen bark. Life continues. They are not monuments. They are not relics. They are living beings, growing slowly toward the light, carrying centuries in their rings, carrying silence like a song. In the usual story of plants, light is the beginning of everything. The sun rises, chlorophyll stirs, and life unfolds in green. Photosynthesis, that quiet miracle, requires light, like lungs require air. And so, we imagine plants reaching for the sun, climbing toward it, opening to it. But not all of them follow that script. In the darker corners of the world, beneath forest floors, inside caves, under blankets of snow, in the folds of roots and rot, there are plants that do something different. They live without light, and not in waiting, but in thriving. They are the outliers, the forgotten kin. Some don't even have chlorophyll, that hallmark green pigment we associate with all things plant. To look at them is to unlearn what you thought you knew. Their bodies are pale, sometimes translucent, like ghosts grown from soil. Others take on shades of red, purple, or ivory, colors borrowed from the fungi they depend on. These are not accidents of nature. These are strategies. These are long adapted lives, shaped by places where light can't reach and time moves slowly. Take Monotropa uniflora, the ghost pipe, also called Indian pipe. It grows in the understory of dense forests, often where sunlight barely filters through. It's almost unnerving to see. A cluster of bone-white stems, nodding like shepherd's crooks, emerging silently from the forest floor. It doesn't photosynthesize. It has no green parts. Instead, it taps into a hidden network underground, a relationship between trees and fungi. The fungi form mycorrhizal connections with tree roots, exchanging sugars and minerals. The ghost pipe slips into that network like a quiet thief, or maybe a guest, drawing nourishment from the fungi, which draw it from the trees. A web within a web, a whisper passed from root to flower. This way of living is called Mycoheterotrophy. Myco for fungus, heterotroph for organisms that must feed on others. These plants are not parasites in the usual sense. They do not harm the trees directly, but they are interlopers, shadows in a system built for reciprocity. They do not give back. They simply take what they need and vanish when the season ends, their pale blossoms collapsing inward like forgotten parchment. And there are others, Mycorrhizae, the coral roots, are leafless orchids that live almost entirely underground, surfacing only to flower. Their roots resemble branching coral, hence the name, but what they really resemble is absence. Absence of light, absence of green, presence of something older and more hidden. Some of these plants live beneath snow for most of their lives, flowering only in short alpine summers when the ice briefly retreats. Others dwell near cave mouths, where mosses and liverworts coat the damp stone in slick green velvet. There are even species that live entirely in darkness, like Gymnosophan, found in the deep forest shadows of tropical regions, barely known even to the botanists who seek them. And then, there are the saprophytes, though the term has fallen out of favor because it doesn't quite fit the reality. Once believed to feed directly on decaying matter, many of these plants also rely on fungi to break down and deliver the nutrients. It's a reminder that in nature, categories are often blurrier than we like to admit. The soil is not a stage, but a sea, and beneath its surface, threads connect everything, plant to fungus, fungus to tree, tree to air. There are even parasitic plants that take a more direct route. Rafflesia arnoldii, sometimes called the corpse flower, is one of the largest single flowers in the world. It smells of rotting flesh to attract carrion flies, but its most bizarre feature is hidden from view. It has no roots, no leaves, no stem of its own. It lives entirely within the body of a host vine, sending out microscopic tendrils that invade the host's tissues and draw out nutrients. Only the flower emerges, erupting from the vine like an alien birth. It does not live long, but it does not need to. And yet, for all their strangeness, these plants are not mistakes. They are not broken. They are the result of ancient experiments in survival. In the dark, where energy is scarce, these species learned to let go of independence. They embraced symbiosis, or subversion, or stealth. They evolved not toward glory, but toward persistence. Their presence is subtle, often missed, but deeply woven into the ecosystems they inhabit. There's something humbling about it. We associate light with life, as if to grow toward the sun is the only noble path. But life finds other ways. Life endures in shade, in silence, in places we forget to look. It doesn't always shine. Sometimes it absorbs, sometimes it waits, sometimes it lives entirely on the margins, where photosynthesis falters but the will to live does not. In the darkest parts of the forest, where leaf litter never fully dries and the air smells of decay, these plants emerge like secrets. They do not grow to be admired. They do not open for bees or butterflies. They bloom for a brief moment, feed on the unseen, and disappear again into the folds of the earth. And still, they are part of the great pattern. They are not anomalies. They are reminders that nature is not one story, but many. Not one kind of light, but all kinds of survival. And in that darkness, they are beautiful. Not in the way of roses or sunflowers or the manicured blooms of gardens, but in the way of fossils, in the way of whispers, in the way of a candle held in a cave. A flicker of life where none should be. A shape the forest remembers, even if we do not. Somewhere in a meadow, soft with wind and heavy with sunlight, a bee is flying low, dipping and weaving, tracing a path you can't quite see. She isn't wandering, she's reading. She's following signs that you and I don't know how to perceive. Subtle shifts in pattern, in scent, in texture, in light. To us, the field is painted in pastels and pale blossoms. To her, it is alive with secret signals. The flowers are not just beautiful, they are speaking. This is the language of flowers, not in metaphor, but in evolution. A vocabulary built over millions of years, shaped not for us but for the eyes of bees, birds, bats, and butterflies. It is a language without grammar, yet full of meaning. A language of color and curve, of light invisible to humans, of timing and placement and promise. It is, in its quiet way, a kind of poetry, designed not to tell stories, but to ensure survival. Flowers, in their most basic sense, are invitations. Reproductive structures, yes, but more than that. Advertisements. Invitations to visit, to linger, to carry away something precious. Pollen, a message in dust. The shapes of petals, the way they flare or fold or flare again, are not random. They are instructions, landing platforms, funnels that guide, beacons that flash in wavelengths we cannot see. Many flowers bear patterns known as nectar guides, lines or dots that lead straight to the nectar source, like a trail of breadcrumbs or a runway lit at dusk. But here's the curious thing. These patterns are often invisible to us. Human eyes don't register ultraviolet light, but bees can. Under their gaze, a daisy is no longer just white. It becomes a vivid bullseye. A black-eyed Susan takes on the form of a solar map. Even the most modest bloom becomes a map. Glowing, radiant, clear. And bees aren't the only readers. Birds, especially hummingbirds, see a wider spectrum of color than we do, often preferring bright reds and oranges. Flowers that rely on them adapt, leaning toward those hues, often producing less scent, because birds, unlike bees, navigate by sight rather than smell. Bats, who pollinate night-blooming flowers, are another matter entirely. Their blossoms open in the dark, pale and wide-mouthed, shaped to echo sound. They reflect sonar, not sunlight. To a bat, these flowers are not silent. They ring like bells. Even within the human visible range, flower color has layers. Pigments like anthocyanins shift with pH, so the same molecule might produce red in one flower and blue in another. Some plants even change color over time, a signal to pollinators that a flower has already been visited and its nectar taken. Why waste energy visiting a bloom that has nothing left to offer? Better to move on, and in doing so, pollinate another. The shapes of flowers, too, speak volumes. Tubular flowers, narrow and deep, are often visited by hummingbirds with long, curved beaks. Flat, open flowers offer easy access for insects with shorter tongues. Some flowers close their petals tightly at night or during rain, not just to protect their pollen, but to signal rest. Others change form entirely, depending on whether they've been pollinated. Orchids, in particular, have evolved extraordinary structures. Lip-like petals, mimicry of female insects, even traps, all to lure one specific pollinator. It is a dance of mutual need, fine-tuned to the edge of coincidence. And sometimes, flowers lie. Some species mimic the appearance or scent of others, tricking pollinators into visiting without offering a reward. A kind of botanical con. Others exude scents that mimic rotting flesh, luring flies that think they've found a feast. Deception, too, has its place in this quiet communication. But for all the evolutionary machinery behind it, for all the strategies and efficiencies, there remains something deeply poetic about the way flowers speak. Because even when we don't understand the message, we feel its pull. We are drawn to blooms the way moths are drawn to flame. Not for nectar, not for pollen, but for something older, something unspoken. There's a reason we give flowers at funerals, at weddings, at hospital bedsides and doorsteps and reunions. a reason poets return to them again and again. They are symbols of beauty, yes, but also of effort, of a plant's energy condensed into color, into structure, into brief blazing moments of life. A flower is not just an ornament, it is an act of reaching. And when we stop to admire them, we are responding, in our own way, to the same cues that call to bees and birds. We are part of the pattern, even if we don't fully understand it. So next time you see a field of wildflowers or a single bloom growing through a crack in the sidewalk, try to imagine what it looks like, not in your eyes, but in the ultraviolet shimmer of a bee's vision, or the vibrant reds of a hummingbird's world. Imagine the flower not as decoration, but as voice, a whisper in color, a plea to be seen. In the language of flowers, silence is an illusion. There is always something being said, beneath the soil, beneath the noise of time, beneath the chatter of seasons passing. There are seeds that wait, not for minutes or hours, not even for years, but for centuries, perfectly still, perfectly sealed. Time, for them, does not pass the way it does for us. It hovers, stretches, slows to a whisper. In the heart of a seed, there is no urgency, only potential. It's easy to think of seeds as beginnings, a packet you scatter in spring, a pod dropped by the wind, a thing that opens and becomes something more. But that's only part of the story. The deeper truth is that seeds are memory. They are time travelers. They are vaults of instruction, sealed tight against the collapse of everything around them. When the world is unkind, when the rains vanish, or the frost stays too long, when flames devour the forest, or oceans swallow the shore, a seed waits, and in waiting, it survives. Some wait only a season, cued by warmth or light or moisture. But others wait longer, decades, generations, lifetimes. The oldest viable seed ever grown was a sacred lotus, found in the dry beds of a Chinese lake. Radiocarbon dated to be over 10 years old, it had survived untouched through dynasties and droughts, through the rising and falling of empires. When planted, it grew. Pale green leaves unfurled on still water, unaware that the world had moved on without it. How does a seed do this? It's a question that biologists continue to ask, not just with wonder, but with deep respect. Inside each seed is a living embryo, not dead, not paused, but in a kind of exquisite suspense. Metabolism slows to almost nothing. Water content drops. Protective chemicals lock in the cellular machinery. Some seeds even produce natural antifreeze, or sugars that act like glass, stabilizing membranes through centuries of stillness. This state is called dormancy. Not sleep, exactly, but a kind of closed door. A refusal to act until conditions are right. And it is not just passive. Seeds listen. They respond to cues we barely notice. Temperature shifts, fluctuations in humidity, changes in chemical signals from surrounding soil. Some require fire to crack their shells. Others wait for their hard coats to be eroded by the stomach acid of a bird. Some will only germinate if light hits them at the right wavelength. Others need darkness. A few will wait until their parent tree dies, sensing an end before they allow a beginning. In the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, buried deep in the Arctic permafrost, more than 1 million seed samples lie in storage. It's a kind of modern Noah's Ark, designed not for animals, but for agriculture, for future food, for a future, period. The vault is engineered to withstand war, climate change, natural disaster. But the true resilience isn't in the vault's walls. It's in the seeds themselves. Each one holds not just life, but the memory of how to begin again. And while most seeds in the vault may only last a few decades or centuries, some, like those lotus seeds, are capable of waiting much longer. Longevity varies by species, by moisture, by storage, but always, there is that same breathtaking patience, a kind of built-in hope, the ability to say, not now, but maybe later. This strategy evolved not just for convenience, but for survival. Environments change, predators arrive, droughts come and go. If every seed sprouted at once, one bad season could erase a lineage. But if a few hold back, if some lie dormant, then the species has another chance. It's a form of temporal diversity, not just a spreading of roots, but a spreading across time, a scattering of possibility. There are deserts where the ground looks dead for decades, until a sudden rain awakens a bloom so vivid it seems impossible. Those flowers came from seeds that waited. There are forests where certain pine cones only release their seeds in the heat of a wildfire, the flames cracking them open like secrets. Those trees regenerate not despite the fire, but because of it. Waiting is part of the plan, and there is something achingly poetic in that. That life, true, viable, green-bursting life, can lie hidden in a grain of dust, a crumb of soil, a speck carried in the beak of a bird or the pocket of a traveler. That a tree can send its children into the future, not knowing what that future will be. That a flower, long dead, might bloom again because a single seed said, not yet. We live in a world of instantaneity. We crave speed, response, rapid growth. But the plants remind us of another rhythm, a deeper one, that sometimes the wisest action is not to act. Sometimes the bravest thing to do is to wait. And in that waiting, there is wonder, because every seed, every dormant, silent, resting seed, is a letter to the future. A message written in genetic code, sealed in a coat of cellulose, tucked into the soil like a secret. It waits for warmth, for water, for the right angle of light. It waits for safety. It waits for a world worth growing into. And when that world arrives, it answers, quietly, without fanfare, a sprout, a leaf, a stem pushing upward through the weight of the earth. A message delivered, finally, across centuries of stillness. In the quiet fields and shaded groves, where green things stretch patiently toward the light, it's easy to forget that plants are not passive. They seem so gentle in their stillness, so harmless in their silence. But beneath the stillness, a quiet armory waits. This is a world of subtle weapons, of slow resistance, of molecules honed over millennia to sting, sicken, or simply say, do not come closer. Plants do not run. They do not bite. They do not flee into the underbrush or take shelter in caves. They stand where they are planted. And because of that, they have had to become something else entirely. Chemists, alchemists, engineers of unseen defense. Their battleground is the air, the leaf, the root. Their armor is made of scent and sap, and the bitter taste that lingers on a tongue long after the first bite. Some bleed white. If you've ever broken the stem of a milkweed or dandelion, you've seen it. That pale, sticky sap called latex. It looks innocent, maybe even medicinal, but it's a trap. Thick and rubbery, it gums up the mouths of hungry insects, clogs their digestion, coats their jaws. In some species, it's laced with toxins. In others, it simply overwhelms. The message is clear. Go eat elsewhere. And then there are those that burn. The heat of a chili pepper isn't really heat at all. It's a trick, a fiery illusion cast by a molecule called capsaicin. When it lands on your tongue, it binds to receptors meant to detect scalding temperatures, setting off alarms in your nervous system. Your mouth floods with saliva. Your skin flushes. You sweat, pant, reach for water. But this reaction wasn't made for you. Capsaicin evolved to deter mammals, whose digestive systems destroy the pepper's seeds. Birds, by contrast, feel none of the fire. They eat, fly, and scatter the seeds across wide distances, the perfect delivery system. So, the plant burns selectively. It punishes some, invites others. Precision, evolution. Elsewhere, the warfare is more insidious. Alkaloids, a class of compounds including morphine, quinine, nicotine, and caffeine, are plant-made chemicals designed to defend and deter. Some interfere with nerves, others shut down enzymes or scramble receptors. A few are deadly in the tiniest doses. Nightshade, hemlock, foxglove, all carry poisons behind their delicate petals. Beautiful, yes, but dangerous too. Not all defenses kill, some only warn. The bitter taste of many leaves is no accident. It's a stop sign, a flashing hazard light to browsing herbivores. This is not for you. Insects learn. Animals remember. A mouthful of misery teaches a lasting lesson. Still, some attackers do not learn. For them, plants escalate. Touch-me-nots, or Mimosa pudica, collapse at the slightest contact. Their leaves fold inward, shrinking back from touch. It's not just sensitivity, it's a defense. Movement startles. It makes predators think twice. In the rainforest, where everything is eaten by something, even a moment's hesitation can mean survival. Some plants take the offensive. The stinging nettle is laced with fine hairs, each a hollow needle filled with a cocktail of histamines, acids, and neurotransmitters. Brush against it, and the needles pierce your skin, injecting their mixture like miniature syringes. The result is pain, itching, inflammation, a sharp reminder that beauty in the forest often comes with a warning. And then there are the plants that cry resin, golden, thick, and slow-moving. When a tree's bark is pierced, when an insect bores in or a fungus tries to spread, it responds with a flood. Resin oozes out, sealing wounds, trapping invaders, acting as both bandage and barrier. In pines, this sap can harden into amber, preserving bits of ancient forests and the creatures that once fed on them. A defense that becomes, in time, a time capsule. There is something strangely human in all this. The way plants defend themselves is not loud or violent, but calculated, precise, refined. They do not lash out in anger. They do not chase or rage. But they do not yield either. They protect. They endure. They learn. Many of the compounds we now use as medicine began as plant defenses. The opium poppy created morphine to deter predators, not to ease our pain. The bark of the willow tree held salicin, a precursor to aspirin, to discourage insects. Quinine, from the cinchona tree, once poisoned those that fed on its leaves. Now, it treats malaria. What was once a weapon becomes, in our hands, a cure. Even caffeine, the stimulant that powers cities, began as a form of warfare. In coffee and tea plants, it accumulates in leaves and seeds to poison insect pests and suppress competing seedlings in the soil. Its effects on humans are incidental, almost comedic. What was meant to kill now keeps us awake. Plants fight in silence. Their wars unfold slowly, invisibly, over generations. But make no mistake, they fight. They stand their ground. And in doing so, they have shaped the creatures around them, including us. We evolved alongside their defenses, adapted to their poisons, grew to crave their chemical songs. We are, in a way, both their enemy and their ally. In the stillness of a forest, it's easy to forget all this, to walk beneath the canopy and think of peace. But every leaf, every stem, every drop of sap tells a different story. One of resistance, of adaptation, of quiet resilience. They do not speak, but they say, "I am not defenseless, and we would do well to listen." At dusk, just as the sun withdraws behind the horizon's edge, a quiet transformation begins in the garden. The colors that once shimmered brightly in the light now soften, giving way to shadows and scent. While the world grows quieter, a different rhythm stirs, not one of song or speech, but of movement, vibration, and purpose. The air becomes a stage for the pollinators, and the flowers their orchestra. Together they perform an ancient duet, a biological symphony written across millennia. Pollination is often described in terms of function, the transfer of pollen from one part of a flower to another, enabling the growth of seeds. But this language is too small for what's truly happening. This is not just reproduction. It's choreography, partnership, the intimate weaving together of two entirely different worlds, plant and pollinator, each shaping the other's form, behavior, and future. Long before humans lit fires or built cities, bees were already perfecting their dances. Bats were navigating moonlit paths with petals as their guides. Beetles were nosing through clusters of fragrant blossoms, and hummingbirds were drinking the sun's nectar one flickering heartbeat at a time. Plants, anchored and still, could not move toward love or carry their own seeds across mountains, so they called out in other ways. They sweetened the air. They colored their petals like invitations. They opened their blossoms at the perfect moment, not just to the day, but to the hour. Some flowers are timed to open only in the morning, greeting bees as they leave their hives with the first light. Others wait for afternoon warmth or for the cover of night, when moths drift through the darkness on wings edged in dust. Each bloom has a clock, not mechanical, but cellular, tied to light, heat, and moisture. Their schedules align with their visitors, and when they don't, the dance falls apart. Bees are perhaps the most famous of the pollinators. Drawn by ultraviolet patterns invisible to our eyes, they land with practiced grace, brushing against the anthers, collecting grains of pollen like golden confetti. In return, they drink the nectar tucked at the flower's core. It's a transaction, yes, but also a relationship. Plants have evolved to reward them, shaping their flowers in ways that suit the bee's size, shape, and vision. Some blossoms are so specifically designed that only a single species can pollinate them, like a lock shaped for one key. But bees are not alone in this pact. There are plants that bloom for birds, offering up red and orange flowers with no scent at all, because birds care more for color than smell. Their long, tubular shapes cradle the slender beaks of hummingbirds, who hover like living darts, their wings a blur, their hunger insatiable. Each visit leaves behind a dusting of pollen, a trace of presence, a promise passed forward. Then, there are the bats, nighttime pollinators whose presence might surprise you. In the deserts of the Americas and the jungles of Africa, large blossoms open only after dark, their pale petals glowing in the moonlight. These flowers are wide, sturdy, and fragrant, designed to attract creatures who navigate by scent and echo. Bats swoop in, guided by smell and memory, sipping nectar and brushing pollen across their furry faces. Where bees buzz and birds dart, bats whisper through the air, silent but essential. Beetles, too, are part of this tapestry. Though less celebrated, they are among the oldest pollinators. Drawn to spicy or fruity aromas, they visit heavy, bowl-shaped flowers, magnolias, water lilies, and others that harken back to ancient times. Their chewing mouths aren't as delicate as a bee's tongue, but they carry pollen just the same, their armored bodies dusted with the future of forests. And then there are the moths. They come when the world is hushed, after the last birds have gone quiet and the stars have taken their places. Their flowers open late, releasing scents made for the dark. Jasmine, tuberose, night-blooming cereus. These plants trade color for aroma, knowing that scent travels farther in the cool air of evening. The moths arrive like ghosts, guided not by sight but by smell, their flight paths erratic but purposeful. It is no coincidence that the flowers that bloom at night tend to be white or pale, their shapes and hues designed to catch the moon's glow. In the absence of light, scent becomes the language. And it is in this nocturnal silence, that some of the most delicate pollination occurs, as if the darkness itself is part of the process. Each of these relationships is a thread, and together they form something vast, an invisible web stretched across the planet, connecting species to species, forest to field, root to wing. A single orchard might depend on hundreds of bees. A rainforest canopy might whisper to bats for help each night. Remove one part, and the song falters. Take away too many, and the silence that follows is not peaceful, but empty. The coevolution of plants and pollinators is not just about survival. It's about beauty, elegance. The way the curve of a petal matches the arc of a hummingbird's flight. The way a scent carries a message across a mile of wind. The way timing matters, not just to the second, but to the season. If a flower blooms too early, the bee isn't ready. If the bee arrives too late, the blossom has already closed. This harmony is delicate, yet astonishingly persistent. It has lasted through ice ages, through volcanic ash, through meteor strikes and mass extinctions. And it continues now, even as cities spread and climates shift, even as new threats emerge. Still, somewhere tonight, a moth is visiting a flower under the stars. A bat is sipping nectar in the dark. A bee is dreaming of light, waiting for morning, and somewhere, a seed is forming. The quiet result of a kiss between flower and visitor, of movement and stillness meeting in a single moment. The symphony plays on. The rainforest does not sleep. Even in its quietest moments, when rain whispers across wide leaves and mist clings to the canopy like breath held in the dark, there is movement. Beneath the silence, the green heart pulses. Leaves unfold in the shadows. Roots inch forward through damp soil. Invisible battles rage underfoot as fungi trade and tangle. Everything is happening, all at once, everywhere. To walk into a tropical rainforest is to step into a world both ancient and electric. It feels alive in a way few other places do. Not just populated with life, but made of it. You are not an observer here. You are surrounded, enveloped, and absorbed into something that doesn't recognize the line between self and surroundings. Because in the rainforest, there is no single story. It is a cathedral of thousands, layered, breathing, competing, blooming, dying, feeding one another. High above the forest floor, the canopy spreads like a suspended ocean. This is where sunlight touches first, and here the plants grow bold. Vines twist skyward in urgency, leaves splay wide to drink in light before it fades, and branches become highways for birds, insects, and mammals. Orchids cling to limbs without ever touching soil. Sloths become part of the slow rhythm, their fur hosting miniature ecosystems of moss and beetles. The canopy is green fire, fast, crowded, competitive. 1,000 lives chasing the Sunday. Below that, in the understory, things are different. Light is rare here, filtered through layers of leaf and branch. Plants grow larger leaves to catch what little brightness slips through. Flowers bloom in bold colors, shouting their presence in the dimness. This layer is quieter, but not still. It hums with tension, the patience of predators, the flicker of wings, the slow motion of vines reaching for support. Life down here must be clever to survive in the shadow of giants. And deeper still, on the forest floor, is a world of decay and of growth. Fallen leaves carpet the soil in a soft layer, broken down by ants, termites, fungi, and time. Nothing lingers long. A leaf falls and is food within hours. A dead tree becomes home, scaffolding, nursery. Roots fan out wide instead of deep, drawing nutrients from the top layer of soil where the action never stops. The floor of the rainforest is a paradox, quiet to the eye, but louder in purpose than anywhere else. Even the trees themselves are temporary. Though they tower, they fall. Though they seem permanent, they vanish into rot, replaced by younger ones eager to rise. This cycle is not gentle. It is relentless. Growth here is fueled by death, and death gives way to new roots almost before it finishes collapsing. Every branch is borrowed. Every inch of space is fought for. And still, somehow, it feels whole. A single organism shaped from many. The rainforest is a body. The canopy is its skin, feeling the sun, shielding what lies below. The trunks are bones, supporting weight and connecting sky to earth. The vines are veins, carrying water and nutrients in loops that stretch across species. The roots are nerves, spreading wide, sensing, adjusting. The soil is memory, rich with the remains of everything that came before. Even the air is part of it. Heavy with moisture, thick with pheromones and pollen, messages drifting on invisible currents. Everywhere, competition and cooperation blur. Trees release chemicals to slow the growth of their neighbors, but they also share sugars through underground fungal networks. One tree falls, and others lean into the light it leaves behind. Birds carry seeds, insects pollinate, monkeys prune branches just by moving through them. Everyone takes, and everyone gives. Not always fairly, but always inevitably. Rainforests are not just green spaces. They are engines. They exhale oxygen. They trap carbon. They push clouds into the sky and call rain back down. From a satellite, the Amazon looks like a lung, not metaphorically, but almost literally, as if the planet itself were breathing through it. And yet, the idea that the forest is a peaceful place is a myth. It is filled with noise and danger. Everything here must defend itself. But defense doesn't mean destruction. It means balance. Nothing in the rainforest lives alone. A fruit may depend on a single bird species to spread its seeds. A tree might only flower when a particular insect is present. Remove one thread, and others begin to loosen. That's the fragility and the strength of this place. It is resilient because it is deeply connected, and that means damage spreads, but so does healing. Even now, as humans carve into these forests, as roads split them and fires eat their edges, the rainforest tries to recover. New shoots push through the ash, vines reclaim fences, roots slip under concrete. It does not forget what it was. It waits, always, to return. And within that persistence is something humbling. The rainforest is not static. It is not pristine. It is not frozen in some ideal state. It is change, rapid, loud, wet, tangled change. It is motion camouflaged as stillness. Every second, something blooms, something falls, something feeds, and then something begins again. To listen to a rainforest is to hear the earth thinking aloud, not in words, but in cycles, in calls and clicks and drips, in the soft sound of a seed cracking open in the dark. It is not a place of silence. It is a place of layered noise, of symphony and struggle, of growth so fierce it cannot be stopped. So, if you ever find yourself there, truly there, beneath the canopy, in the breath-warm air, your skin damp, your ears adjusting, pause. Don't just look. Don't just listen. Feel the green pulse. In a world built for speed and sound, it's easy to forget the languages that speak slowly. Movement, for most of us, is an act of effort. Muscles pulling, limbs stretching, energy spent in bursts and rhythms. But plants do not have muscles. They do not pace or pounce or race. And yet, they move. Not just the wild tangling of roots underground or the slow stretch of branches skyward over seasons, but purposeful, visible motion. Shifts of leaf and stem and cell, unfolding in silence, if you have the patience to watch. Sunflowers turn their faces toward the light. It isn't just poetic, it's anatomical. Inside the stalk, tiny mechanisms respond to the presence of sunlight, guiding the bloom across the sky. east to west, like a celestial companion. This dance is called heliotropism, a form of phototropism, and it's driven by hormones, chemical whispers that soften one side of the stem, allowing it to elongate, bend, and follow the sunday. Young sunflowers do this daily. They wake with the sunrise, track it across the sky, then reorient themselves at night, anticipating tomorrow. As they age, they settle, holding their heads to the east, basking in the warmth of morning. It looks simple. It isn't. Inside every leaning stem is a symphony of decisions. Light is sensed through pigments in cells, especially one called phototropin. This pigment sends messages through the plant's body, triggering a cascade that shifts water, expands cell walls, redistributes pressure. It's not just bending, it's balancing. And sunflowers aren't alone. Many plants lean toward windowsills, twist along fences, seek out brightness in dense forests. Ivy spirals toward open air. Houseplants tilt in search of brightness, almost as if they're trying to peer through glass to see what's out there. This isn't passive growth. It's intentional, just not in the way we usually define intention. But light is only part of the story. Touch matters too. If you've ever brushed your finger along the feathered leaves of Mimosa pudica, you know the suddenness. The leaves don't slowly fold or sway. They snap closed, as if startled. For a few moments, they stay that way, tight and tucked, as if deciding whether to open again. And then, gently, they relax. It feels like magic, but it's biology. This movement is called thigmonesty, a touch-induced motion not tied to direction, just to contact. Inside the leaf are specialized cells that can rapidly move water in and out, collapsing the leaf structure almost instantly. The plant isn't thinking, not in any brain sense, but it is reacting. It's protecting itself, deterring curious mouths or clumsy hands. The speed is startling not because it's fast by animal standards, but because it's fast for something we thought couldn't move at all. Venus flytraps, too, live in this narrow gap between movement and stillness. Their traps are triggered by touch, not once, but twice, within a few seconds. That double tap ensures the plant doesn't waste energy on falling raindrops or stray dust. When the trap snaps shut, it begins to digest, breaking down the insect it caught, extracting what the soil around it could not give. The movement is precise and expensive. A trap can only close a few times before it dies. Other movements are even slower. The coiling of a vine around a trellis, the shy turning of a leaf toward rain, the closing of flowers at night, and their reopening at dawn. These are acts of motion hidden by time, things you wouldn't notice unless you recorded them or watched for hours. But just because we can't see it easily doesn't mean it isn't happening. Plants move constantly. They open and close stomata, microscopic pores on their leaves, to breathe. They twist roots toward water. They angle leaves to catch or avoid sunday. They grow differently when touched repeatedly, as if remembering the contact. Some even use electric signals, not the same as nerves, but similar enough to send waves of communication from leaf to stem to root. When one part of a plant is wounded, the rest is notified within seconds. Not with a scream, but with a signal. This kind of motion is not what we're taught to look for. It doesn't thrill or flash or dazzle. It unfolds over hours and days and weeks. But it is there, purposeful, quiet, full of intent, shaped by millennia of adaptation. And in some ways, it's more impressive than the movement we're used to. Muscles make motion easy. Plants had to invent it from scratch. To watch a time lapse of a plant growing is to see time rewritten. Roots fan out like fingers. Leaves unroll like paper scrolls. Buds emerge from nowhere, open, fade, fall. What felt like stillness was always alive. We just weren't looking the right way. There's humility in that. in the realization that movement doesn't need to be fast to matter, that life doesn't have to be loud to be active. Plants have been quietly moving longer than animals have existed. Turning, folding, climbing, reaching, withdrawing. They do not chase prey or flee predators, but they still act. They still respond. We live in a culture of instant motion. Scrolls, swipes, taps, notifications. But the movements of plants invite a different kind of attention, a longer gaze, a slower breath. They ask us to reconsider what motion is and what it's for. Not everything that moves must rush. Not every decision must be quick. There's power in patience, and in that patience, a different kind of beauty. Not the spectacle of speed, but the grace of persistence. A sunflower tracking the light is no less extraordinary than a cheetah sprinting across a plain. It just asks us to meet it on its terms, to slow down, to witness, to wait. The wind does not leave fingerprints, but it leaves shapes, and trees, though rooted and silent, carry those shapes in their bones. Out in the open where the wind travels unbroken, trees become dancers and fighters both. Bent, but not broken, their trunks arc like question marks or reach out sideways, angled by decades of relentless push and pull. A tree standing alone on a cliffside does not grow as it pleases. It grows as it must. Every gust shapes it. Every storm writes something into its structure, bending not only branches, but the very rules of how wood forms inside. This is not passive endurance. This is strategy. Inside the tree, cells shift their focus when exposed to regular force, from wind, slope, gravity, or the strain of uneven growth. A tree will develop what's known as reaction wood. In softwoods like pine or fir, it forms on the underside of a branch or leaning trunk and is called compression wood. In hardwoods like oak and maple, it forms on the upper side, known as tension wood. Each is different, but both serve the same purpose: to strengthen, to pull, to anchor the tree against its own collapse. These special tissues aren't decorative. They're dense, fibrous reinforcements, tiny architectural responses to the world outside. Where a human might brace a beam or reinforce a foundation, the tree does the same at a cellular level. It thickens one side. It adjusts the angles. It grows not upward in defiance, but with a kind of curved understanding. It remembers the wind, not as a moment, but as a pattern. The spiral trunks of trees on high mountain ridges or coastal bluffs aren't mistakes. They are signatures. The wind didn't just push the tree, it taught it. Every twist and turn, every knot in the grain is a memory of a season, a gale, a drought, a moment of stress that didn't end in snapping, but in adaptation. Some trees even lean permanently, having grown tilted from childhood, not because they fell, but because that was the only way to survive. Trees on steep slopes grow roots that grip like hands. In permafrost, roots grow wide and shallow, avoiding frozen soil. In windy plains, branches stay low, hugging the earth like a secret. And in forests that see hurricanes, typhoons, or monsoon winds, trees remember more than gusts. They remember survival. Even in the forest's quiet, even in trees that seem symmetrical and still, there is evidence. Take a cross-section of the trunk, and you'll see rings. Each year, a new circle. But look closer, and the rings aren't always perfectly round. On the windward side, the direction the storm came from, the rings are tighter, more compressed. On the leeward side, they're stretched. That's the tree recording the wind. Not once, but every year, for decades, maybe centuries. It is a diary written in wood. There are trees older than cities, older than languages, that carry these swirling records inside them. Scientists can read these rings like weather reports, learning when the droughts came, when the floods hit, when the wind howled hard enough to reshape a trunk. Some trees have survived fires too, and their rings show the scars. A charcoal line, a change in growth rate, a memory baked into the core. The past is not gone, it's just quiet. And it's not just stress that leaves a mark. Trees remember gentle wind too. In orchards and experimental gardens, researchers found that trees grown in greenhouses shielded from the breeze. They were weaker. Their trunks were softer, their roots shallower. Without the stress, they didn't learn how to brace themselves. But when the same trees were exposed to movement, to wind, even just a little, they responded. They grew stronger. In Japanese, there's a term, furusato. It means the old village, or more poetically, the place that formed you. For trees, the wind is part of that place. So is the slope, the soil, the seasons. A tree does not grow in defiance of these things. It grows through them. And when you walk through a forest, you are walking through a gallery of biographies. Each twisted trunk, each leaning pine or bowed oak, has written its own survival into form. There is something deeply human in that. The idea that resilience is not always upright or symmetrical. That strength can look like a spiral or a slant. That beauty, sometimes, comes from being shaped. If you've ever stood beside a tree that grew in hardship, a lone cedar clinging to a cliffside, a gnarled beech shaped by centuries of storms, you know the feeling. It's not just admiration, it's recognition. We, too, grow in response to stress. We stretch where we are pushed. We find balance in tilt. We become strong where we were once fragile. Like trees, we carry our storms within us. Not always visible, but always present. A part of our structure, a reason we are still here. And perhaps that is the quiet lesson of wind-shaped trees, that endurance isn't about resisting change, but about learning how to grow with it. That the forces we fear, the winds that bend us, the storms that shake us, are also the forces that shape us into something enduring, something with roots, something with rings. Leaves are everywhere and easy to forget. They rustle, they flutter, they scatter across sidewalks in the fall like natural confetti, and most of the time, we don't look closely. We think of them as decoration, maybe, or just seasonal markers, the way trees tell time. But the truth is that every leaf is a little laboratory, a fragile green engine humming with invisible life. And when you sit quietly and consider it, really consider it, it's astonishing how much is happening in a single whisper-thin blade of green. A leaf is more than a solar panel. It is more than the part of the plant that faces the Sunday. Inside its thin-veined surface is a factory of chemistry, a sensor tuned to the light, a skin that breathes for the whole body of the plant. Each one is shaped by the environment that surrounds it. And like everything in nature, it must balance risk and reward. Too thick, and it wastes resources. Too thin, and it tears in the wind. Too open, and it loses water. Too closed, and it starves. But somehow, for millions of years, leaves have managed to walk that invisible tightrope, season after season. The structure of a leaf, if you could hold it under a microscope, would look almost architectural. It's not just flat green tissue. There's an outer skin, called the epidermis, coated in a waxy layer called the cuticle that helps seal in moisture. Beneath that lies the mesophyll, where most of the photosynthesis happens, tiny cells packed with chloroplasts, those green-flecked machines that catch sunlight and transform it. Every cell is performing photosynthesis like a chorus, taking carbon dioxide from the air, mixing it with water from the roots, and turning it all into sugar and oxygen. The oxygen goes back into the world, the sugar feeds the plant, and the energy from the Sunday, distant, indifferent, ancient, becomes something sweet and living and green. Scattered across the surface of the leaf are stomata, little pores that open and close like mouths. These are where gases pass in and out. Carbon dioxide coming in, oxygen leaving, water vapor escaping. The stomata don't just gape open all day. They are responsive. They know when it's too hot, when the air is dry, when the light shifts. They regulate their own openings, measuring light and humidity like instruments in a weather station. They are mouths and lungs and valves all in one. But leaves aren't just for living. They're for letting go too. When autumn comes, especially in temperate zones, something remarkable happens. The tree doesn't just passively watch its leaves fall. It orchestrates the entire process. In deciduous trees, shorter daylight and cooler temperatures signal a shift. Chlorophyll, the pigment that makes leaves green, begins to break down. As it fades, other pigments emerge from beneath. Carotenoids that shine yellow and orange. Anthocyanins that glow red and purple. These colors were there all along, but hidden. It's not death, it's transition. Behind the beauty of fall is a slow withdrawal. The tree begins sealing off the base of each leaf with a special layer of cells, an abscission layer, that gradually cuts the leaf off from the rest of the plant. Nutrients are reabsorbed, water flow is halted, the connection loosens, and one day, quietly, the leaf lets go. It doesn't fall in despair, it falls in completion. Its job is done, and when it lands, it doesn't stop giving. A fallen leaf becomes food, shelter, soil. Its sugars and fibers break down and feed the ground from which the tree drinks. In forests, fallen leaves build up into mulch, into soft, damp beds that protect roots and hold moisture. They become insulation in winter, and in time, they become the earth again. So much motion in a thing so still. Not all leaves look like the ones we picture when we think of trees in October. Some are thick and waxy, like those of succulents, storing water in dry environments. Others are split and feathered, shaped to resist wind or funnel rain. In tropical canopies, some leaves develop drip tips, sharp ends that shed water quickly to avoid fungal growth. In low-light environments, like jungle floors or dense forests, leaves grow wide and flat, like solar panels trying to drink in what little light filters through. And in places where sunlight is intense and brutal, some plants have tiny, hairy leaves, or even spines, a trade-off, protecting themselves from too much sun or thirsty animals, while still managing to photosynthesize. The form of a leaf is a biography. Every ridge, every pore, every color is shaped by the pressures of its habitat, its parent plant, its lineage. It is an answer to countless generations of questions: how to stay cool, how to stay full, how to make more with less. The leaf is not weak, it is adapted. And when the wind blows, when light flickers across it, when it trembles but holds on, it is still working. Some plants shed leaves like rituals. Others hold them for years. A few, like evergreens, trade them out slowly and silently, never going bare, but always renewing. And even in those that lose all their leaves for a season, the memory of those leaves remains. In the buds curled tightly for spring, in the scars along the branches, in the roots that still feed an invisible process of waiting. If you ever find a leaf and hold it in your hand, feel how light it island paper thin, but inside it are the traces of ancient sunlight. A mechanism so precise that it runs without sound, without wires, without fuel. And somehow, it feeds entire forests, fuels entire cycles, sustains everything from ants to elephants. It is not decoration, it is breath. Captured, it is light. Converted, it is one of the quietest miracles you will ever touch. After a fire, there is silence. Not the soft, peaceful kind, but the hollow hush that follows something vast and unforgiving. The air still smells of carbon and ghosts. The blackened soil is warm, and the trees, if they still stand, are scorched like old statues left too long in the Sunday. From a distance, it looks like nothing could ever live here again. It looks final, but nature is not done. It never really island. Within days, sometimes even hours, life begins to shift and whisper and return. Shoots of green emerge from charred soil, tentative but certain. These are the pioneers, plants that specialize in going first. Their roots dig into the ashes, not in denial of what came before, but because of it. They don't run from disturbance, they use it. Their seeds lie in wait, often buried deep, insulated by the earth until just the right moment. When the canopy clears, when the heat breaks their dormancy, when light spills down to soil that hasn't seen sun in decades. This is the quiet choreography of succession. First come the colonizers, grasses, ferns, mosses. They arrive quickly, scattering across the wounded land like soft cloth laid over open skin. Their presence does more than decorate. They stabilize. Their roots bind loose soil so it doesn't blow away in wind or wash away in rain. They start rebuilding the microbiome beneath the surface, feeding fungi, sheltering bacteria, restoring relationships so tiny we forget they exist. Then come the shrubs and hardy trees, species like alder, birch, and aspen. These are fast growers, opportunists, light seekers. They don't live long, not compared to the giants of the old forest, but they build scaffolding. They shade the soil, cool the ground, invite birds and insects back in. They drop leaves that rot and enrich. They offer perches and pollen. Slowly, life layers itself once more. Animals follow the green. Insects arrive in clouds. Birds pick at seeds. Rodents scurry through underbrush that wasn't there just months before. The pulse of the place begins to normalize, its beat steadying as if remembering an old rhythm. And then, only when the stage is set, do the elders return. Not the literal elders, but their children. Oaks, redwoods, pines, beeches, the long-game trees. Their growth is slow and deliberate, not rushed. They wait their turn, stretching over decades, sometimes centuries, knitting a new canopy from the rubble of the old. Forests are not static. They are not frozen in time. They are process, dynamic, adaptive, always responding. When disturbed, they do not repair themselves like a machine swapping out parts. They regrow like a story rewriting itself. And depending on where you are in the world, that story might take different forms. In the Arctic, tundra mosses reclaim land after ice. In floodplains, willows bend and return, sending out new shoots after waters retreat. In tropical jungles, vine-covered gaps from fallen trees become sites of exuberant rebirth, where sunlight fuels an arms race for height and color and bloom. Even lava fields, barren and bone-hard, are not immune to this green persistence. In places like Hawaii and Iceland, lichens creep across volcanic rock, cracking it open millimeter by millimeter. Over years, centuries even, dust and wind add layers, seeds catch, grasses take root. The cycle begins, impossibly, again. Ecological succession is not quick, and it is not linear. It can stall, backtrack, leap ahead. It responds to climate, to disturbance, to chance. It is an orchestra without a conductor, each player listening to the others, each movement written in chemistry and sunlight. And it doesn't need us, but we, perhaps more than ever, need it. In a time of burning forests, of shifting climate, of landscapes lost faster than they can regrow, the idea that ecosystems can rebuild themselves is both comforting and haunting. They will return, but not always in the forms we knew. The forest you remember may never come back exactly as it was. A different one may take its place. With different trees, different rules, a different rhythm, but it will still be green, still be alive. Sometimes the pioneers aren't native. Sometimes they are invasive, taking advantage of the openness. Sometimes humans interfere, replanting with species that grow fast but don't belong. And sometimes the wound is too deep, the soil too poisoned, the rain too erratic, and succession stalls like a song half finished. But even then, somewhere in the margins, Something tries. Lichen on a boulder, a weed between cracks, a fungus feeding on rot. Hope is cellular. The miracle is not just that forests can grow back, it's that they know how. Not consciously, not in the way we think or plan, but their DNA carries instructions written by time itself. Genetic memory passed through millions of cycles, patterns refined by fire, ice, and flood. A leaf doesn't ask how to unfold. A seed doesn't hesitate when touched by light and moisture. These are old scripts, rehearsed countless times before, and each time they're played, the cast is slightly different, but the story continues. You could walk through a regrowing forest and not know what it once was. But if you stop, if you listen, if you press your hand to the bark or kneel beside the shoots, you might feel the echoes. What burned, what flooded, what froze, and what followed. Because the forest does not forget. It just begins again. You are breathing in a story. Not a metaphor, not a symbol, but a literal, physical truth. The air that just entered your lungs carries molecules shaped by leaf and stem, exhaled by chloroplasts, spun into being by light. Somewhere, perhaps near, perhaps impossibly far, a tree released that breath into the atmosphere. A fern in a canyon, a blade of grass near a roadside ditch, a ribbon of algae waving in the current. You may never meet it, never know its name or shape, but for a moment, its life became part of yours. And the carbon you breathe out now, the soft cloud of warmth leaving your lips as you settle deeper into stillness, it will return. It will rejoin the quiet cycle, carried by wind, touched by rain, dissolved into soil, taken up by root. One day, it might be folded into a seedling, drawn into bark, or pressed into the sweet flesh of a berry. You are, in ways both poetic and precise, part of the forest already. There's no need to move to feel it. You don't have to step into the trees or sleep beneath their canopies. They come to you. Every breath is an exchange, a communion without words. Plants do not need us to speak their language to be generous. They have been breathing life into this world for over 2 billion years, long before mammals, before fish, before bones or blood or songs. And still, they offer it. Oxygen, colorless, tasteless, invisible, is perhaps the most intimate gift on earth. You can't see it swirl into your lungs, but it feeds every cell, every thought, every flicker of consciousness. The brain that listens now, the heart that ticks as you rest, all of it is humming on borrowed light. It is humbling, isn't it, to know you are made possible by something that grows in silence, that does not chase or conquer, but simply roots and reaches, that measures time not in hours or seasons, but in rings, that offers, without asking for thanks. You are surrounded by a world you did not build, but that built you. The calcium in your bones may have once drifted in seawater. The iron in your blood may have passed through ancient roots. The water in your veins was once rain on leaves, mist in valleys, ice in a glacier long since gone. The atoms that make up your body have traveled farther than any plane or satellite, traded hands through storms and seeds and stones. You are not apart from the forest. You are a continuation of it. When you fall asleep tonight, whether on a bed, near city lights, or in a cabin wrapped in pine, the world outside will continue its gentle breath. Leaves will turn to follow the darkened sky, closing where light has gone. Roots will stretch slowly downward. Spores will drift on air you just exhaled. Life will move at its own pace, slower than ours, but just as constant. And one day, in the far-off hush of future time, the elements of your body will return to that rhythm, not in fear, but in peace. The carbon will be released, the minerals will loosen, the water will flow on. You will feed something new, a seed, a sapling, a wildflower on the edge of a trail. In that way, even the end becomes a gift. But you are not at the end tonight. Tonight, you are here, listening to the quiet pulse of life, feeling the vastness of your place in it. Perhaps you are stretched out beneath blankets, or curled into a chair, or swaying gently on a night bus crossing a sleeping city. However you are held, know that you are held well. The forest makes no judgments. It does not ask you to be more than what you are. It welcomes you as it welcomes the rain, the breeze, the bird that lands and then leaves. You are part of this, always have been, even when you forget, even when you rush, even when the sky feels too far and the ground too hard. Even then, the forest waits and breathes and gives. So tonight, let yourself be returned. Let your thoughts scatter like dry leaves. Let the weight fall away like snow from branches. Let your chest rise and fall with the rhythm of something older than words. You are allowed to rest. You are allowed to dream. There is no test to pass, no wisdom to grasp. Only this moment, and this breath, and this gentle unfolding. Outside, the trees are swaying with wind you cannot hear. Moss is drinking in the dark. Seeds sleep in soil, holding centuries in their hearts. Petals unfurl beneath moonlight invisible to our eyes. A world exists that does not need light to bloom, and in that world, you belong. Sleep well, in the arms of the forest,